Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Sheriff of Nottingham from Arcane Wonders. Now, a quick disclaimer here before we go into the description of the game and the eventual review. This is from Arcane Wonders' Dice Tower Essentials line of games. I believe this is the first and only entry in that line. These are games that were handpicked by Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower, who has some sort of friendship and business relationship with Arcane Wonders. These games are supposed to be games that are so good they should be in every gamer's collection according to the Dice Tower, although of course that remains to be seen. But I wanted to let you know this because I am a freelance contributor to the Dice Tower Network. I contribute the Kickstarter updates, the Board Game Breakfast, and I've also done stuff for the Dice Tower Showdown and sometimes the weekly podcast as well. But I have not let that influence my opinion of the game in any way, shape, or form, either favorably or unfavorably. In fact, I had to buy my own copy of the game, so this is not from the publisher. I just wanted to let you know that so that you know that there's no bias here whatsoever. Now, moving forward, what is Sheriff of Nottingham? This is actually the latest edition or printing of a game that's actually been around for a while. The original version of the game was called Hart under Grenz, I believe, which I think means close to the border. And it actually took place in the modern day, albeit a comical modern day, where you're trying to smuggle goods across the Mexican border, probably Mexico. And then the last edition of the game was called Robin Hood, which shares a theme with Sheriff of Nottingham, as you can tell. And in both Sheriff of Nottingham and Robin Hood, you are trying to smuggle goods past the evil sheriff. The difference with Sheriff of Nottingham is that it's got an artwork upgrade, and I believe they changed around some of the mechanics just to make it a little more streamlined. So you're these different merchants trying to get your goods past the sheriff, and if they're perfectly legal goods, and if you declare that they're legal, you'll have no problem whatsoever. But in order to get the good stuff, which is to say, maybe you want to mix it up and have different types of goods, or maybe you want to get illegal contraband passed because those are going to be worth a lot of money at your stall, you're going to have to lie to the sheriff. And the sheriff might suspect that you're lying when you're trying to get those goods past him, but he is susceptible to some, how shall we say it, bribery. And that is the core of the game. It's only a little more complicated than that, so we'll go ahead and take a look at how the game is played very briefly, then we'll come back and I'll let you know what I think. Okay, this is the setup for a typical 5-player game of Sheriff of Nottingham. It goes from 3 to 5 players, and I do recommend 4 or 5. The rules are only slightly different with 3, but I can't imagine it's as much fun. So the goal of the game is to have as most money as possible by the end of the game. The end of the game is going to occur when each player has had a chance to be the sheriff twice. So when you have this marker, you are the sheriff, and that is going to pass every round. In a 3-player game, it's when every player has had the chance to be the sheriff 3 times. So money at the end of the game is counted not just in the coins that you'll actually start off with 50 of, each player will have 50, but also the good cards that you're going to be trying to acquire and get past the sheriff. That's the entire goal, is to get these good cards, whether legal or illegal, past the sheriff and into your merchant stall. Each player takes control of a different merchant tile, and all these are the same. You have blue, green, red, yellow, and purple, and you'll also have a bag with which to store goods, and you'll start with 6 of those good cards, 7 if you use a variant that makes it a little bit easier on the players as opposed to the sheriff. Although remember that the sheriff passes in every round. So what exactly is in the deck? Well, first off, after you get done dealing each player their hand, you're going to make a discard pile, 2 discard piles on each side of the deck of 5 cards each, shaved from the top of the deck. That's because on your turn you may be able to draw from the discard piles as opposed to blind drawing from the deck. So the goods that are in there. First, you have 4 different types of legal goods. You have bread, which has a value of 3 and a penalty of 2. The penalty is only applied on any of these cards if the sheriff catches you trying to sneak goods through that you did not actually declare, or if the sheriff inspects your bag and what you have in there is all that's been declared, you were telling the truth, then the sheriff is going to have to take that penalty in gold, and so the gold always swaps between those 2 players, but I'll get back to that later. Then you have cheese, which is also worth a value of 3 and penalty of 2. You have chickens, which are a value of 4, and you have apples, which are a value of 2. Now, all of these cards have different amounts that are in the deck. So, for instance, there's the most of anything is the apples, which are 40. There's 48 apples in the entire deck. and there's I believe chickens might have the least of them. Now it's not just you're trying to have as many of those as possible because they each count for their face value at the end of the game. But also, whenever you get your goods, you'll lay them out around your player board. But also, there's such a thing as the Kings and Queens bonus at the end. Whoever has the most of any of those individual goods is going to get a bonus. So, for instance, apples, since there's so many apples, it's kind of hard to have control of them. You'll get a bonus 20 points at the end of the game, $20 essentially. For bread, you'll get 15. Now, there's also the Queens bonus, which is second place for each of those, and that's 10 for everything except for chickens, which is only 5. Now, the thing is, if there's a tie, then you're going to split the points evenly with whoever you're tied with, rounded down. So it's not friendly ties in that regard. But that's not all that's in the deck. You also have contraband. And contrabands are things that you can never declare when you're trying to get things past the sheriff. You always have to hide them and hope that you can get them through. And the reason for that, you don't get any kind of king or queen bonus for these, but on their own, they're worth a lot more points than the standard goods. So you have crossbows, which are worth $9, but there's a penalty of 4 if you're caught with them. And then you have silk, which is $8, penalty of 4 if you're caught with them. Mead, 7 value, and pepper. I have no idea why pepper would be illegal, but that's $6 value. And I'll get to how you can actually get those through in a second. The last type of card that you're going to find in that deck, although it is optional, are the royal cards. Those are cards, they always have a little golden banner at the bottom with the sheriff's badge. These are optional, but I kind of recommend playing with them no matter what because they don't really complicate the game that much. Basically, these are better versions of the 4 legal goods, and they always count as more than 1. So the green apples here count as 2 apples in addition to being worth 4. So whenever you're going for your king and queen bonus, those will count as 2. The golden apples count as 3 apples. The Gouda cheese count as 2 cheese. The blue cheese counts as 3. Then you have ones for bread and chickens as well. You get the idea. Shuffle all those up, deal them out to each of the players, make your draw pile and the 2 discard piles, and then the gameplay is going to begin. So you'll randomly decide who's going to be the sheriff, and like I said, that's going to pass at the end of every round so that everyone will be the sheriff 2 times or 3 times in a 3-player game. When you're the sheriff, you skip the first 3 phases of play and don't worry about doing anything until the other players are done with those phases. Now, as a player, as a merchant, I should say, first thing you have the option to do is going to market. When you go to market, you get to look at your hand and decide which cards you want to keep and which cards you want to get rid of, if any at all. You don't have to do this. If you do decide you want to do it, you can take 1 to 5 cards from your hand, set them aside, and then draw 1 to 5 other cards, either from the discard piles or from the draw piles. But if you decide that you're going for the discard pile, you have to do that first before you start blind drawing from the deck. You can look freely through the discard piles, but you cannot change the order of the cards that's in there. So if you want a card that's 3 down, you're going to have to take all 3 of those cards. And then after you're done with all that, you'll take whatever cards you set aside and put them all on top of one of the discard piles of your choice. After everyone's going, starting left and going clockwise from the sheriff has had a chance to go to market, then you load your merchant bag. So every one of the players, the merchants, and whoever's the sheriff for the round, but they just don't use it this time, has one of these merchant bags. And you're going to put from 1 to 5, at least 1, you have to put at least 1, but no more than 5 of your 6 cards that you have into the merchant bag. So let's just say I do this. I'm not really paying attention to what I put in here just for this example. So I'll load up my bag, and whenever I snap it shut, I'm going to throw it in front of the sheriff, and I'm done. I cannot change the contents of that bag. Every other merchant is going to do this, and then it goes to declaration. Now, starting left of the sheriff and going clockwise, each player has to declare what they put inside of that bag. When you're declaring, you have to declare 1 legal good, apples, cheese, bread, or chicken, and you have to say exactly how many you put in there. You cannot fib about how many cards you put in there. It's impossible anyways because everyone can see how many cards you have left out of the 6. But for instance, I would say 4 apples, or 5 cheese, or 3 bread, whatever it might be. Now, you can completely lie about that, but you can still only declare a legal good, and you have to declare only that 1 legal good. So even if you have 2 legal goods, apples and cheese, you can still only declare cheese or apples, which is kind of confusing at first, but that's just how the game works. Once everyone has declared, then we go into inspection, which is the sheriff's phase. This is where the sheriff gets to act, whoever that is, for the turn. The sheriff, and you can set a time limit for this if you want. There's an app that lets you set a time limit easily, and they recommend. I also recommend 1 minute for each player. The sheriff then decides whether or not he wants to inspect each of the bags. But first, the sheriff can say, "Okay, Red, I don't think you were telling the truth about having 4 chickens in here. I think I might have to inspect this bag. What do you say?" Now, at that point, the red player, who is obviously being shaken down, can say, "Well, I don't really want you to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and offer you $10 to go ahead and not look in that bag." You can bribe the sheriff. The reason the red player might want to do that is because she has some contraband in there that she's trying to get past. Now, the sheriff is just a player like everyone else, and the sheriff wants money, which means points. So the sheriff might go ahead and take that deal and give the red player her bag back. And you don't have to trade for just money. You can trade for goods that you already have out in your stall. You can trade for a good that's in the bag. Although the merchant might be lying about that. Like, oh yeah, sheriff, I'll give you 2 of the apples I have in my bag. And then that person opens their bag and, surprise, they didn't have apples to begin with. You can also promise favors in the future, but of course, those are not binding in any way, shape, or form. But if the sheriff decides not to inspect the bag, that decision is locked in, and at that point, the player whose bag he decided not to inspect takes all the cards out and lays them out right away, so the sheriff gets to see just how much of a mistake he made in letting them get away with too much contraband at that point. Or the sheriff can just decide not even to threaten that player and just give them back the bag. Like, "Okay, it's yours. I don't think you did anything wrong." And in which case, again, they open up their bag and put the cards out next to their stall right away. The alternative to that is if the sheriff decides to inspect a bag and for whatever reason doesn't want to accept a bribe, or the bribe that they're being offered by the player does not meet his high, rigorous standards. In that case, the sheriff rips open the bag and roots through it. Now, if the sheriff opened up the bag and the player was telling the truth, like they declared 4 apples and they actually had 4 apples, the sheriff is going to have to take a penalty of however many coins the penalty has for each card that person was being truthful about. So if it was 4 apples, the sheriff would have to take 8 coins, whoever's the sheriff for that round, and give them to the player who was telling the truth. But then the merchant gets to take those goods and put them out just as normal because they don't take any kind of penalty. But if the sheriff decides to root through the bag and they were not telling the truth, they had contraband in there, whether it was legal or actual contraband items, well, then we got a problem because now the merchant is going to be able to keep whatever legal goods they declared. So if they declared they had 4 apples, but they actually had 2 apples and 2 contraband, they get to keep their apples, but the contraband gets confiscated and gets put into one of the discard piles of the sheriff's choice. And then the player who was inspected has to pay a penalty equal to those items that were discarded. And by the way, whenever you get contraband, that is the one thing, like let's say you have all these contraband items, that's the one thing you put at the top of your player board face down. No one else gets to see the contraband that you have, whereas everything else that you have, the legal goods, just gets either laid out or put in a pile in the appropriate spots. And those are always public information. You can always ask people how many they have so you know what you're vying for the kings and the queens bonuses. Now, the sheriff is going to do this for every person deciding to threaten them or inspect their bags or not inspect their bags. When he's gone through every single bag, one way or the other, or given them back, then that's the end of the inspection phase. You go to the end of the round. At the end of the round, the sheriff is going to pass to the next player clockwise. Each player is going to draw back up to 6 cards, and then you do it all over again. Go back to market, load your bag, declare to the new sheriff, and then wait for inspection or not, end of round, and so on. Like I said, you're going to do this until every player has had a chance to be the sheriff 2 times or 3 times in a 3-player game. Then you're going to count up all of your points, which is the most tedious part of this game. Counting up your points is as simple as taking all of the money that you have, counting all of that up, and then adding up the value of all the goods cards that you have, legal or contraband, and then looking to see if you have control for the Kings and Queens bonus, or if you're tied with any other players for it, and adding those points to your total. And there is no notepad to keep track of any of this, but you can do that with the app. Well, whoever has the most points is the winner. If there's a tie, it's whoever has the most legal goods, and that is Sheriff of Nottingham. Now, I should have probably mentioned in my intro that I have never actually played the previous versions of this game, Heart Under Grens and Robin Hood, but so I can only judge this based off of Sheriff of Nottingham, so just know that going forward. As far as components and theme, the components are great. Really, really like the artwork in this. I mean, there's not a ton of it because most of the cards have the same artwork for the goods, and then you've got your characters, but it all looks really, really well. Even the box is nice. The box insert is even good, which is something I really can't say for a lot of different box inserts. The coins are really good weight, although, of course, the game is screaming to have metal coins in it. If you can afford that, be my guest. But everything looks cool. The little bags that you use to put the cards in, I kind of wish that they weren't snap bags. I don't even know why they bothered. It seems like there's something that's going to break with enough use, as a lot of those different types of cheapo bags do. But I'm glad there's something that you put the cards into. I know that in the original Heart Under Grens, there was actually like little suitcases. That's obviously not going to make thematic sense here. But maybe if there was like merchant carts, I don't know. We're talking about like an $80 game at that point, but they're okay and they do the job well. I would just caution your players to be careful when they're handling the bags, because I know a lot of people, when they threw the bags over to the sheriff for the round, the sheriff will be picking them up, the bags, and sort of squeezing them, and I'm like, there's still cards in there. So that might be a minor issue. As far as the theme, it's a good theme. I don't know how well it integrates into the gameplay too much, because by the nature of the game, the sheriff is going to be passing round to round, which is a bit weird. It sort of takes you out of the theme a bit when you're acting one way on one round, then all of a sudden it's someone else doing it. But that, again, that's the sort of limitations and necessary for the game to work as it is. Some of the other things with the goods are a bit weird. Like, I don't know why cheese is contraband. This might be some historical thing that I'm just not quite getting. I can understand why crossbows are. I don't really know why meat is contraband too. Do they have prohibition in the storyline of Robin Hood? I don't know. So that was a bit odd, but still, I mean, the main theme of being merchants trying to get past the sheriff is there, and it works. I would say that if you really want to get the most out of the theme of this game, it's going to require a lot of acting on the part of the players. If you're just playing this game methodically, like, okay, I'm putting these cards in here, and all right, I'm the sheriff, I'm going to inspect yours, do you want to give me anything? I mean, if you just play it like that, it's just going to get very boring and very tedious very quickly. So I think what you need to do is be prepared to do a little bit of acting. I try to do that as best as I can, like, this bag, I don't know. I mean, we've got tariffs and we've got laws here, and I think that you're not telling the truth, sir. We looked at your flight log. So I was just totally going out of the actual theme of Sherwood Forest, and just having fun with it and acting like I was a TSA agent and all these different things. But that's kind of what you bring to it. But I think if you do those sort of things, you're going to get the most fun out of the theme. Now, mechanically speaking, this is an interesting game in the sense that there's a lot of lying required. I don't think that you need to be the best liar in the world in order to be successful at this game, because there is clever card play involved as well. It's all about knowing when to be honest and just put what you claim into your bag, or just trying, doing the I'm just going to try to lie my ass off and get as much contraband passed as possible on this turn. It's knowing when you can get away with that, but also depending on the sheriff, but also knowing when you might just want to slip one piece of contraband in with 4 other legal goods that you declared, knowing that you might get something. So there is some interesting card play at work here, and hand management, and the whole thing with having the capability to blind draw or draw from the 2 different discard piles is interesting. There's a ton of cards in this game, by the way, which makes it very irritating to shuffle, but again, this is sort of a necessary thing, even if you play without the royal bonus cards. I do recommend the variant where you take out 10 cards at random. It doesn't change the game that drastically, but it does make it a little more interesting. And I can't stress this enough, you need to play with a timer. You can use the official app that they have, or just get a sand timer from some other game, but having a 1-minute timer for every person to decide whether you're going to inspect their bag or not is vital, because otherwise the game drags on way, way, way too much. The game should, I mean, on the box it says 60 minutes. That can easily be the case, but you need to have the timer in order for that to happen, especially if you're playing on a 5-player game, which is probably the best way to play this. 4 or 5. 3 players, I didn't try it. I'm not really interested in doing so. I can't imagine it's that great. But with 4 or 5 players, it's the most interesting, but you need that timer because people can easily get bogged down into just like, I mean, deciding whether or not to even threaten you and then deciding whether or not to actually inspect your bag after they've either turned down the opportunity to bribe you or not. That could just drag on way too long. But if you do use the app and things are humming along nicely, I think that this is a pretty solid game. And I was actually surprised by how much I liked it. On first glance, reading about it and seeing other videos about it, I didn't think it would be my speed necessarily. But I think that it's because it's not just negotiation with the other players, negotiation, i.e. bribery, and threatening, but it's also, like I said, that clever card play, and it works really well with it. I like the idea that you can do some, if you're really into it, you can do some trickery and offer the, I had this work a couple of times, and a couple of times it didn't work, but offer the sheriff for the turn a bribe, even though all of your goods were legal, hoping that he would be insulted by your bribe and turn it down and inspect your bag anyways. And hey, look at that, nothing but legal goods that I fully declared, so now you're taking a penalty. You can do things like that to drain money away from people that are winning, and I think that's a cool thing. But you're not going to be able to do that too many times because you're only going 2 times around unless you're playing in a 3-player game. But I like that you have some trickery that you can do there and trying to bluff people out. But like I said, you can still do well in the game as long as you're doing really well at set collection, and being able to know what everyone has around the table is critical, which can get kind of annoying because you're getting a lot of cards over the course of the game, which means that it's easiest, instead of splaying them all out, just to put them in piles. So you're constantly asking people, how many apples do you have? How many bread do you have? Okay, it's just more things to think about and more things to keep track of, so it's a little bit wonky and fiddly. Also, end game scoring, it's pretty, actually I should have mentioned this in the component section. They really should have had a score pad at least. I know that the app can do some score tracking for you, but there's a lot of different numbers to keep track of here. You have to count up all of your stuff, count up your contraband. You have to see if you have the kings and queens bonus for each of the different legal goods, and then compare those to other players, and then you're going to have to split them, and the point total is pretty high. So I'm not saying that this is difficult math to do, but it is annoying math to do. And I can easily see people making a mistake. And we had to do some numbers checking just to make sure, because we were dealing with so many numbers individually. So that was a little irritating. I think some sort of 7 Wonders type score pad would definitely have helped this game a lot, app or not. But still it worked. And by the way, I do like the King and Queen's bonus idea for the different goods. If it was just strictly trying to get as many goods as possible, it wouldn't be as interesting, but having that race to get the most of anything and like trying to keep track of the cards that are there, I think that's another important reason why it's good to use the variant of taking the 10 cards out from the deck. So there's still some doubt, maybe someone has things. You don't know if they have the contraband that gives you extra apples or extra cheese. That's a cool thing. And by the way, the royal bonus contraband, just play with them. They're not a big deal. It says in the book, don't play with them for your first game and consider adding them later. Just throw them in. They're not a big deal. They're very easy to integrate, and I think they make the game a little more interesting, just enough more interesting to say that they should be in there from the start. So overall, what do I think? I think it's a good game. I think that it's a bit fiddly, probably too long. Even with the app, it can start to drag out near the end. I've played it both ways. But I think it's a good game. If you don't like negotiation and haggling with people and threatening people and trying to be intimidating, this most definitely is not for you, because even though you can win via clever card play, at some point you're going to be the sheriff and you need to make some hard decisions and you need to get up in people's faces and see if they're lying or not. But if you can take a modest amount of that together with the set collection of the game and the really cool components and artwork, then I would definitely consider giving this one a shot. I was pleasantly surprised. I really didn't think I'd like the game as much as I did, but I am looking forward to playing again.